So today we're taking a look at this, the MSI Trident 3 Arctic gaming PC. This is MSI's take into creating a compact and powerful gaming PC without sacrificing on the whole desktop class experience. Priced at $1,500, the Trident 3 competes head-to-head or competes well within the market compared to the G20 Ti, the Gaming GT, and the Corsair 1. But considering the compact nature and the specs packed under the hood, can this keep up with the above-mentioned systems? Let's find out right after this.
Thermaltake Premium is now selling gaming chairs with carbon fiber-like leather material, standard bucket seat design with lumbar pillow and neck cushion, good adjustable armrest with a sleep recline built in. The chairs are available in multiple colors and different sizes. Learn more in the description below.
Alright, so MSI has approached the Trident 3 from a pure console gamer's perspective because, let's face it, gaming PCs have got to a point where high-end hardware can be accommodated inside a slim tower chassis that's almost the size of an Xbox One or a PS4. But you also can't forget the fact that these systems cost 2 to 3 times more than a typical console. But that's a topic that we'll need to investigate for another video. Taking a look at the physical aspect of this PC, I have to credit MSI for not going the too fancy and aggressive route, as the Trident 3 in my eyes looks simple with a slight hint of angular elements here and there. The white plastic chassis definitely stands out from the competition, but it's built really well with appropriate ventilation for the components inside. MSI has also included a touch of RGB by implementing this LED strip at the corner. The user can customize colors through the driver software that comes pre-installed in the system. As for size, it's 4.7 liters in volume, and when you put that in context with the Gigabyte Gaming GT, that's half the size, and if you need a better perspective, here's a shot of both of them compared to a full tower chassis. Yeah. One unique aspect about the system is that it can be operated either in vertical or horizontal configurations for space efficiency, but do note that vertical setting requires the included base for support. Thankfully, MSI has implemented ventilation grills on the base, so that should help with temperatures. The specs packed under the hood are also impressive. For starters, we're looking at a Core i7-7700 non-K CPU, 16GB of RAM, a 256GB M.2 SSD, along with a 1TB hard drive and a GTX 1070 GPU, all for $1,500. MSI also includes a membrane keyboard and a mouse. Having spoiled by mechanical keyboards and expensive gaming mice, I thought that these were okay, but not really suited for gaming if you're really serious about it. The keyboard does feature RGB lighting, but the texts on the keycaps were too small for visibility that might affect your experience, but props to MSI for including a peripheral set in the first place. The I/O is well laid out throughout the system. Taking a peek at the back, you'll find audio jacks, 4 USB 3.0 Gen 1 ports, a single 3.1 Type A port, Gigabit Ethernet HDMI for the onboard GPU, power input, and an HDMI port for VR Link. Display I/O is also fairly straightforward. The GTX 1070 features the standard layout found on other Pascal GPUs, like 2 DisplayPort 1.4 ports, a couple of HDMI 2.0 ports, and dual link DVI. The front features 2 USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A ports and a single Type-C connector that also supports the USB 3.1 Gen 1 standard. You also get headphone and microphone outputs and an HDMI output that's dependent to the rear I/O. That's because this particular port can only be enabled by linking the VR port at the back to one of the HDMI ports on the GPU, and MSI does include a short HDMI cable for that. For power, the Trident 3 relies on an external 330-watt solution, and that makes sense because the unit is only 4.7 liters in volume, so one can only imagine the challenges of accommodating a standard PSU inside the chassis. Speaking of the chassis, I did get a chance to open it up to understand the layout inside, plus it's actually not that difficult to get in. Once you detach the bottom cover and remove these screws, but wait, there is a warranty void if removed sticker right on top of one of the screws. But as always, I ignored that part and proceeded with the teardown. The next step is to slide the side panel, which then reveals the Aero ITX GPU, the custom designed motherboard to house the desktop class i7-7700 CPU, along with its cooler and access to 2 RAM modules, which by the way can be swapped out for a 32GB kit. The M.2 SSD and the 2.5-inch hard drive are located at the back, but unfortunately I wasn't able to access them. Switching gears, let's move on to the performance segment of the video because I'm pretty sure most of you are looking forward to it because I certainly did when booting this thing up for the first time. So let's take a look at some synthetic benchmarks comparing it to the G20 Ci from ASUS, the Gaming GT from Gigabyte, and the Corsair 1. Starting with Cinebench R15 running the CPU test, the Trident 3 scored 20 points higher than the G20 Ci that shares the same processor, but it does trail behind the Gaming GT and the Corsair 1 because those two systems featured an unlocked 7700K. Switching to OpenGL, and we see the same story with the Trident 3. It trails behind the GT by about 3 frames per second, and that's partly due to the higher clock speeds on the 7700K that's inside the GT, but the difference is so minimal. I also performed our standard Premiere Pro render test exporting a 1-minute 4K H.264 video, and the Trident 3 stayed right in line between the Corsair 1 and the Asus G20 Ci. But we also can't forget that these results rely heavily upon hardware and software optimizations. Regardless of that, I still think that this is an excellent option for content creators who are looking for a compact editing PC. The 256GB M.2 SSD inside the Trident 3 blazed through Crystal DISKMARK, averaging around 1500 megabytes per second read speeds and around half of that for the write performance. I was surprised to see that kind of performance coming out of a $1,500 machine, but what's also interesting is that this is the cheapest among the four that you're seeing here. However, I was not that impressed with the read-write performance of the included 1TB hard drive. This certainly did affect game load times during my course of testing, and it's certainly something to keep in mind. Now on to gaming. Battlefield 1 at 1440p set to Ultra dished out frame rates similar to the GT. It shouldn't be a surprise because both systems featured the same GPU except for the processor, but nonetheless, averaging more than 70 frames per second with an Ultra preset proves how powerful the Trident 3 is. Overwatch at 1440p set to Epic averaged around 77 frames per second on the Trident 3, once again tying with the Gaming GT. Doom at 1440p set to Ultra using the VULKAN API averaged well over 100 frames per second, slightly outperforming the Gaming GT by not that much, but closing the gap towards the G20 Ci sporting a GTX 1080. Finally, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is again a heavily demanding title, averaged just a tad below 60 frames per second, outperforming the GT by a slight margin. Looking at temperatures, the CPU ran the hottest among the four. As you can see under load during our standard IDA64 test, the 7700 got to a whopping 93 degrees Celsius, and the program did display overheating signs but did not throttle. Clearly, the built-in CPU cooler isn't doing the trick, so I would avoid high-level computation tasks. The GPU, on the other hand, ran a lot cooler than expected, and that's because the MSI Aero ITX 1070 sports a 92mm Torx fan right at the top of the heatsink, plus the chassis features appropriate ventilation, so temperatures were well within reach, and this was even the better part. So this is our sound test portion. I have the microphone set up right here, right above the frame. So let's take a listen to how the Trident 3 sounds during idle. While idle scenarios have the Trident 3 operating almost silently, under load it did not sound like a jet fan, which is awesome, especially when you compare it to the G20 Ci and the Gaming GT. In fact, acoustic performance was one of the annoying factors of those two systems, and I'm glad that the Trident 3 stands out among them.
Oh, hey there. NCX.com is Canada's leading e-tailer for anything your mind desires. Just keep within those categories, which are plenty, and get tempted by the weekly deals. Visit NCX.com for all them sweet deals.
So to conclude, the Trident 3 Arctic from MSI has surprised me in every way. I love the simple and angular design of the chassis, plus considering the compact nature and the performance packed under the hood, this thing is a killer gaming PC. I would even see users considering this as an alternative or a perfect HTPC for their living room. But you also can't forget that this is a fully fledged desktop computer with a wide selection of I/O. However, I am worried about the CPU temperatures because I wish MSI offered a custom fan profile for the CPU cooler so I could ramp it up to at least bring down those temperatures. But that's a compromise that you'll need to take if you value fan noise. And that's where I'm going to end this review. I want to hear your thoughts about the Trident 3 Arctic from MSI. What do you guys think about the design and its performance compared to the competition? But most importantly, do you think spending $1,500 on a gaming PC like this is justifiable? Let us know in the comments down below. I'm Ibor with Canucks. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more similar content. and we'll see you in the next one.